Welcome to A Woman's Brew, where women talk about beer. In today's episode, we're joined by John from Spookton to talk about their beers and our collective experiences of imposter syndrome. I'm Joanne, and this is Tori.
Hello, hello.
And we're two beer-loving women on a mission to get more people drinking and talking about great beer. Come join us. Right, we are joined today by the wonderful John from Spookton. Hello. So we got in contact with you because we saw this awesome beer that's called Imposter Syndrome.
And bag.
And the bag, yeah. You got your bag? I've got my bag as well.
Good.
Love these. They're so good. Because basically we talk about imposter syndrome way too much. So we thought we'd connect with you, find out all about that, and find out about Spookton. So, welcome. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and the brewery, please?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I was a home brewer and set up Spookton earlier this year as a sort of we've started as a contract sort of cuckoo brew, contract brew type outfit. My history is in home brewing, or my connection to beer is drinking it and home brewing it. And then took a bit of a plunge after the pandemic. It was just a bit like, well, time to have a go sort of thing. And so set up like that. And then we released 3 beers in sort of early June, late May, I think. My memory is not so good. And then we've been selling them and getting them sort of out and about. And then, and so the concept behind the brewery is that for each beer that we brew, we give a sort of a small donation to a local. Well, it hasn't worked out with local, but the concept was that it would be like local donations to good causes. In a manner that sort of ideally the drinker doesn't really notice, but makes a big difference to those that receive it. So there's sort of a charitable element to it, but we're not a charity brewery. It's not like we're not set up for that purpose.
Amazing. I hadn't noticed that bit until I read it in our questions on our script.
I did notice it because if you remember our charity beer episode, I actually believe that I mentioned Spookton because I was looking at breweries. Well, I was looking when we did that episode, I had been just looking to see like what charity beers were out there like at the moment, and I remember coming across the brewery because it had that bit about like we're not a charity brewery, but we do make charitable beers effectively, and I thought that was really interesting.
So the idea is that we're a charitable brewery, not a charity brewery, and that's for a number of reasons. I suppose one reason is that some charities don't want to partner with an alcohol brand, and we respect that. And some charity, and what I don't really want to do, or what I definitely don't want to do, is I never wanted someone to choose us because we were giving to charity. It sort of feels a bit icky. Not icky's the wrong word maybe, but it feels a little bit like choose us, otherwise you won't give money to charity. And so it was very early on where it was like, well, we're not going to ram it down people's throats that we're doing this, because a lot of people are giving to charity in a lot of ways, and they don't need to sort of have us guilt tripping them in a bottle shop. And I think, and so we didn't really want people to feel like that, I suppose. And we wanted to donate to things that we felt we could sort of highlight, and we'd like to sort of talk about them, but we didn't want people to feel obliged or beholden to us donating or otherwise. And that was the other reason why we donate based on how many that we brew, not how many that we sell, which again was super important for me, because I didn't want to sort of like hold anyone hostage, sort of saying like, well, if we don't sell any of these beers, you're not getting a donation, sort of thing. And
right.
It felt a lot better for me to sort of say, well, okay, we're going to brew 1,500 litres and that's going to come out at X. Here it is, sort of thing, as soon as it's canned or packaged. So that people don't, as I say, people don't feel sort of obliged or feel like they must buy ours over someone else because of this. I want people to buy it because they like the beer, basically.
Because I found you because of that, and then I started following you, which then led me to seeing Imposter Syndrome, which then made me be like, oh wow. So I think when I had first seen it, there wasn't any beer that I could buy, so I was like, oh, I'll just follow and then I'll see when something comes up to be released. And that's when I think you had posted about Imposter Syndrome, and that's when I was like, oh, hang on, their beers are red, like there's beers I can buy now, this is great.
Yeah, every now and again. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I think we found that, I mean, I think they were all, I think you could buy them from us, but I think it's pretty risky taking a punt on a sort of a mixed box of 6 off some brewery you've only just heard of. And so it's nice to sort of wait until it gets to your local bottle shop and you can buy a couple of cans rather than a dozen, sort of thing. And I think initially it was just a bit slow to get into those sorts of those shops where and now some of them are saying yes, which is great. And so you might find us in a few wider locations at the moment, but that's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, we've had that story before.
Yeah, it is what it is. There's a lot of good breweries out there at the moment. So
yes. Right, so should we crack open this first beer?
I'm excited to try it now.
Yeah, we've got Giggles, which is a dry hopped pale ale. I'm excited. Where you get all the lovely.
I think one thing that we noticed that we really liked was just all the names.
Yeah, the names are really good.
And we're really curious on where the names came from. Like, where did the name? Well, actually, if we start while we're pouring this, anyways, Spookton. Where did I read on your website? But do you want to say where it came from? Because I read it and I absolutely loved it. So I want you to tell people.
Yeah, I mean, that's so at base. I was playing a computer game like SimCity, and sort of bumbling away, and my then girlfriend, now wife, was like, "Oh, have you named your town after me?" Sort of like that. And I just named it Spookton, and I don't know why, but I'd sort of gone, that's sort of a funny, doesn't mean anything name. And then when we were sort of thinking up names for the brewery, we sort of felt like it was, I mean, you can call a brewery anything, can't you, really? And so we sort of were like, we didn't really know what to call it. And then we kept coming back to this idea of sort of local charitable giving, and coming back to the idea that it would be really nice if this town or whatever, a village, existed, and that's where this sort of money was going to benefit everyone. And so it's like, it sounds weird, but it sort of just seemed to fit for us to sort of like that the brewery is the place that we're trying to invent, trying to sort of generate, which again sounds a bit wanky, but
I don't think it does at all. I think when we talk to like breweries, like when we've spoken to like Mirakai and so it's all about building the community.
Yeah.
And it's the community you want to have, and it's kind of like you're building the community that you want for your people, how you envision it to be. And I think it's like really noble that you're like, oh, I want to do all this like charity stuff, but I don't want to make it like someone's holding a gun to your head to be like, or support me because I'm doing this over somebody else. Like you want to do all the right things, and you want to just do it because you're like, I just feel like that's the right thing to do, and I'm not doing it because, like you said, for that icky reason or anything else like that. And I just thought that was, when I read that on the website, I just thought that was really, really cool. As a gamer myself, I was like, I love the fact that you're like, I just named a town this, I forgot all about it, and like, what's the name of brewery?
It was sort of City Skylines, which is just, as I say, a sort of a Sim City type game, and it was just a throwaway thing. And then she sort of reminded me about it a couple of times after, and it sort of was, we just found it funny. So it's stuck enough to put on a label, I suppose. So have you had a drink?
Yes,
it is really nice.
It's really lovely. It's nice and light, but it's got lots of like fruitiness.
I was gonna say the fruitiness in it as well, and it's just got that like there's like a dry crispness to it as well that sort of like balances out really well with that fruitiness. And it's very I didn't even look at the ABV, but it's very session 4%. Yeah, I'd say it's a very sessionable beer. I feel like it's definitely one that you can have like just quite a few of these with friends and just sip it straight. Like, you know how you just kind of you find that you finished a glass more like quicker than you realized.
Yeah,
I feel like that's one of the beers that you could just drink it quicker than you've even realized that it's in the glass.
It's a Saturday afternoon beer.
Yeah,
or a Sunday brunch beer.
Yeah. It's a Monday night beer.
It's a Monday night beer.
It is, absolutely is.
Where did the name Giggles come from? Because now I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
So I mean, so again, sort of, I mean, taking half a step back, the idea for the names and for the labels and the layout of the labels is, we wanted it to be, I keep saying we a lot, but it's just me. I wanted it to be very accessible to anyone sort of strolling into a bottle shop, really. And so we wanted it to be clear that these are our beers, or this is our range. And so like there's like a nice wavy thing on the can that sort of lines up, and there's a sort of a bar at the bottom that tells you what's in it and what color it is. And then we wanted things like this is a pale ale, and so the label's pale, and just stuff like that. And like we did an oatmeal stout that had a dark label, and we've done and sort of the Imposter Syndrome one is sort of a bit more hoppy and a bit stronger, and it's a bit more vibrant. And we wanted people to we wanted to give people a bit of information before they got to it, and that sort of carried over into the names. And so the oatmeal stout is called Gloom, which is sort of, I just really like it as a word, and it sort of seemed to be representative of an oatmeal stout to me. And Giggles is just supposed, very good, and Giggles is supposed to be sort of similar, but with a pale ale. It's supposed to be about drinking a few of them at a barbecue and having a few and laughing and sort of socializing without being on a session sort of thing. Well, on a sessionable session sort of thing. And so the idea is that it's supposed to be, and the other thing is I quite, the check that I do when I named them is like, if I was in a pub, I would like a pint of Giggles. I think that's a funny thing to say.
Yeah.
And so like, as I say, my bar for running with something is obviously quite low on all this sort of stuff. So yeah, we went with it, and it sort of it seems to fit the beer. And for me, I wanted it to be a fun beer, and it's sort of, for me, it is. You can drink a lot of it without falling over, and it's fruity and crisp and yeah, drinkable, I suppose, is that's the aim.
It's funny that you said barbecue beer, because I was gonna say, like, I feel like my perfect scenario for drinking this feels like it would be in the sun with friends around having a barbecue. Is very much like what Joe and I would talk about as like a barbecue beer.
Exactly what I was going to say. Like, yeah,
and then I was like, it's getting cold and I'm still enjoying it. So I was like, I won't describe as that. And then when you went barbecue, I was like, absolutely, that was the first thing that popped into my head.
I mean, you can have barbecues in October, and you can.
I very much do.
You can have stouts in August. I think so. It's definitely the beer that I knew it was decent beer, but I didn't love it as much as the other two, I suppose. But then I've definitely found that more people less into craft beer have really liked it. And so for me, that's like, oh, great. Well, it's a sort of an entry level beer, if you know what I mean. It brings people into the hobby or pastime hobby, I suppose. Hobby is home brewing days, but brings people into the thing without sort of knocking them around the head with one flavor or another, I suppose.
It's nothing too bold in the way of like the complexity. It's something that the way it's executed, you can be a fan of craft beer and still enjoy it the same way as someone that is newer into craft beer. You can share that as something that both both parties were like, because it's well executed, but in terms of how much is loaded into the flavor of it, it's like it doesn't need to be. It's really good as it is. But if you were to put too much different flavor combinations in there, that might be off-putting for somebody that hasn't really even worked out what they like yet. But you can almost guarantee a pale ale is probably going to land quite well with them. And I feel like, this is something that I could share with my friends that don't necessarily drink craft beer, and they would enjoy it just as much as I would drinking it.
Yeah, and like that to me is a really, I used to play ultimate frisbee, and we used to spend the entire time trying to get other people to play the sport, and we were always sort of up against this sort of, it was just hard work to try and get someone involved, I suppose. And with particularly with this beer, I sort of wanted people that would be buying, like a 4% macro lager. I sort of want to get them into craft beer. I sort of don't really care so much about me all the time, like, because then you just end up with beer at these sort of extremes of flavor and profile and whatever. And so for me, if we're going to be successful, or if craft beer is going to grow, it has to be accessible, and there has to be these sorts of beers that are a little bit more like, okay, this isn't that much from what I used to, and then here are all the nice things, but this is an independent and they're based in near me, sort of thing. And so it's deliberately trying not to scare away people that don't like craft beer or don't think they like craft beer yet.
That's perfect.
I think Joe and I have spoken about like labels as well, and what I really like about the label, and I think Joe, you'll probably agree, is I love it's like it says right on it, fresh, fruity, hoppy, like know what you're getting. And I really love the fact that you put the hops that you used, because there's a lot of times that we've gone to look for something for a podcasting purpose, or we're trying to do something in particular, and we're like, cool, what does this have in it? And then you can't really see what you should expect from it, either in terms of the hop profile or just overall flavors. And I feel like your label is definitely covered that. I mean, it says right on the back, dry hop with citronide 7, expect flavors of grapefruit and mango, and then on the front where it says fresh, fruity, hoppy, 4%, like, and you're right, it's a light colored label. Like Giggles has a light connotation to it in that sense as well. And it is fun. It is quite fun going, can I have a pint of Giggles? That would be pretty good.
That's what we're aiming for.
Yeah, that color, your color conventions for the labels, I really appreciate that. Like, we talk a lot about how we are drawn to labels when we're buying beer, and there are times where I bought a beer and it's been a particular color, and then I pour it and I'm like, oh, that's not what I thought it was going to be, because
it's a subconscious thing, isn't it?
Because subconsciously I've been like, that's going to be like that because it looks like that. And obviously, you need to sometimes put that aside and drink it and taste it. But I think it's helpful, especially for the people where we're trying to make it more accessible, get people in, make it clear to them what's in there, because they pour that out and it's very dark. That's not the feeling that you're getting from it, and that's how some people can get put off. So
you're right, like gloom. Like I'm not gonna pour gloom, a dark coloured can of gloom and then be like, this is gonna be super light coloured, and it is like that just subconscious thing. I think you don't even think about.
Our brains make those connections quickly for us.
If it turned out to be a lager, I would be like, so confused. I'm like, what has happened?
And I don't really understand why someone in craft beer wouldn't put the hops on the can.
The only thing that I've deduced is that I think sometimes if it, and I could be completely wrong, this is just I like to throw out just, here's my wild guess, that's probably completely inaccurate. But the only thing I can think of is they're brewing at a scale where it might have to change on a regular basis, but it's like a core range beer or something, and it's something they're going to continue to brew, but they might not always have the exact same hops, so they don't want to put it to can, because then you've got to get new labels made. That's the only reason I can think of why you maybe wouldn't put it on there.
But I think it's a label thing, you're right.
I think it's something that, like, people that, it's fine, I guess, if you are making it for people that are like entry level, maybe that's not what they're looking for. But some of us are like definitely label nerds, and we want to kind of know the ingredients. We want to be like, oh, am I tasting this or am I getting that? And And it's really handy to have all that information there, especially I think it can be more helpful because then you can look up the hop and go, what am I expected to get taste wise? Oh, okay, cool. There we go. But I also appreciate if it is like if I'm going to spend this money printing a can, maybe don't commit to a certain hop that might change.
I think you're right.
It.
It's the people that are dealing in volumes way beyond my wildest dreams. You're right. I think you're right, definitely.
It doesn't happen that often, but it does tend to be, when I've noticed it has tended to be like a volume that you said is like
big,
quite big to the scale that I don't even really know. I just know that it's big.
Yeah.
Ones where they push buttons, they're not like emptying out. They're not emptying out the mash tun.
Right.
Do you choose a different charity for each beer, or does it all go to the same one?
So the original theory, or the concept, was that each beer would have a charity that is associated with the beer, or could be associated with the beer. And so we managed that with Gloom, and that gave money to Magic Breakfast, which is a sort of a kids poverty, basically feeding children breakfast before they go to school. And the idea, the connection there being oatmeal porridge sort of thing. And nice. So that's what we would like to do with all of them. But like just when we started, just after we were about to start, just before we were about to launch, like the Ukrainian war happened. And so we were it was just like, oh, well, we should give some money to that. And so we gave some money. I think Giggles' money went to Care for Calais, which is a refugee charity based in Calais and do a lot of stuff over here as well. But it's about integration and sort of support at that point. And we also gave money to the DEC appeal. I think going forward, we would like to do that, but just stuff keeps coming up more and more at the moment that I think probably we don't want to box ourselves into making anything definite, I suppose. There's a charity near me called, well, it's a sort of a social cause called we've just brewed some more Giggles and Imposter Syndrome for keg, and that is likely to benefit a sort of a homeless reintegration charity. So reintegration is the wrong word, but sort of support people as they first move into housing after being homeless. But again, it would be nice. The aim is to sort of brew so much beer that we can be quite picky and sort of tie things in and be smart. But as I say, there's just so much rubbish going on at the moment that I think for the moment, we'll just be giving away money to people that sort of we think it will benefit the most in the short term, especially with winter coming and all of that. Yeah, bit gloomy.
I feel like there's no short of causes to support, to be fair.
And I think I was thinking about this the other day about whether I should start approaching charities and being a little bit more sort of getting them to approve the donation so that I can talk about it a bit more openly. But I think the more I do that, the more I stray into the sort of icky using them to sell beer. And I really don't want to get into that situation of a charity sort of saying, well, you're making profit off. It's like it happens with Pride. Like suddenly charities that do nothing for the LGBTQ community for the rest of the year, suddenly they're very pro Pride just because they'll sell some more stuff. And that's just
performative. It's performative. And like nobody, as much as everybody wants to support somebody that is charitable, it's like you don't want to be supporting where it crosses that line of like, oh, it's performative now. But I do think that like, people can sense the bullshit. And I think that they can kind of tell when someone's just doing something as a one-off and they really don't have a vested interest for the most part. I think there are some people that are quite, maybe they're quite good actors in that sense. But I think it's just like, again, it comes back to that community you build. And I think like when you're building a particular community, like people can sense the bullshit, and they can tell like, oh, this person's not doing it for the right reasons. And no one wants to spend money with someone where it's just performative. They want to know that that person actually genuinely picked out that charity and cared enough because they cared, whether or not that's how they identify, or they've been through that situation, or they just care because they've got friends that have, and they want to support it. And I think that definitely shines through. And I find it really interesting and like in a refreshing way that you're just like, yeah, I'm struggling with like two parts of myself. One that's just like, I want to be able to shout about these charities more, but then the other's like, oh, but then I don't want to be seen as performative, like, because there's not a lot of people that I feel like would be in that similar. Some people would just be like, yeah, I want to shout about it, and it's just interesting that you're like, oh, I don't want it to come across that way.
Yeah, I suppose the way I view it is that if someone's buying one of my beers, it's probably because they've chosen not to buy another craft beer. And I think that in which case then my success is cannibalizing some other element of the market. No, I don't mind doing that if they like the beer or like the stupid things I put on Instagram or something like that. Like, I don't particularly mind it if they're making a decision on that. I have a problem with it if they're doing it because they think that it's a more worthy choice, I think. Yeah. And so, as I say, like I'm that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to sort of make a beer that non-craft drinkers might drink, because then that's sort of growing the pie in these horrible words that are currently rolling around. But yeah, so as I say, I think if I boast about money, I mean, loads of people give to charity. Everyone gives to charity. It's like fine if someone's producing loads more beer than me, and they do a charity beer and it gives more to charity, then that's super. And I don't think that I want to try and rob them of a sale because I'm one of the good guys. It just doesn't make sense. So the concept is we brew nice beer, and there's also this thing.
Love that. People also have funny ways of looking at it. So I used to work for a homelessness charity, and we get brought in the best. My favorite thing that ever got brought in was a guy turned up with a box of stuff, and it had an unused 21st birthday card, 2 martini glasses,
okay, stop.
what else did it have in it? Like really random bits. Like there's some clothes and things, but just always sticks out in my mind that there was this 21st birthday card that hadn't been used and 2 martini glasses, and we gratefully took it and thank you very much. But then I'm like, what do you think the people that we're supporting are going to do with a 21st birthday card and 2 martini glasses? Like, you could have taken that to the charity shop, but people wouldn't take things to the charity shop because they're like, well, they're going to make money out of it. Yeah, but that money's for the charity. And some people are like, no, I'm not taking any of my things to a charity shop because they'll make money out of it. And it's like the way people view it is really interesting when it comes to charities. So yeah, it's an interesting balance that you have to get.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I get it right all the time. Definitely not. But I think
charities don't always get it right either.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you make a really strong point. My background isn't in sort of working at charities like that, and so I sort of feel like I need to take more care, I suppose. And so, like with each beer that we release or have released in the past, we do sort of mention what we're donating to, but we don't ram it down everyone's sort of throat every time we mention the beer. Oh, by the way, this is the one that gives to this sort of thing. Right. And so, but equally, we've had people that have gone like, which charities? I don't believe you, sort of thing. Yeah. And sort of send me an email at sort of 11 o'clock on a Sunday night, sort of asking me to sort of share my financial information. Yeah. And which I'm happy to do. Like, I think if someone's that interested, then I'm happy to let them know exactly how much we brewed, exactly how much we canned, and exactly when we were donated into who, sort of thing. But I don't really want to keep a sort of a running donation list of I gave Oxfam X sort of thing. I mean, what would be really nice is if we ever have a tap room, I really want to do a totalizer that ticks up every time someone buys a round.
Yeah.
And so
that's amazing. It's an amazing idea, because you could put it on a board and you could like digitize all of it. As a person that works in IT, I'm like thinking of like the board that you could make in the background of the charts that someone buys around, and it just goes like a stock market, like all of a sudden it's like, and there's another one that goes to charity.
So that, you sort of buy your round, and then it sort of just goes boop, and sort of the number just slightly ticks up. And so the idea being that these aren't big sums per can, but it all adds up, and you sort of turn up on a Saturday at 1 o'clock at a tap room, and then you leave at 10 o'clock, and it's a very different total, and that would be really cool. And I think again, I don't think it would necessarily have to, it shouldn't necessarily say we gave X to NSPCC, but just to sort of remind people that, hey, like, you are continuing to contribute, even though you don't feel like you are.
I think it just shows like, it's a bigger thing than just you as a single person. It's a community. Again, it comes back to that. It's a community thing, isn't it? It's like, you as a community have done this. But I can understand it's probably difficult being like, we don't want to keep running total, because you didn't start the brewery to do that. You weren't like, I'm doing this for kudos.
I just want to say I absolutely am keeping a running total, and absolutely I'm keeping receipts of what I give away, just so that I can sort of say, like, just so that if someone goes, hey, just in case I get audited by a member of the craft beer community that goes, hey, do you really give someone?
No,
which I understand. I would understand.
Absolutely, it's responsible, and it's a responsible thing. Like, if you feel like you want to know, like, it's fair enough to ask. But I can also understand how it's sort of like you keep all of that, and you know what you're doing, but you're not necessarily going like, here, I've posted this up everywhere for all to see, because the brewery it's not like you started it to make it about that. You were just like, in the process of us doing this, it's also nice for us to do that.
Yes, that's exactly the thinking.
I want to crack open Imposter Syndrome, because I really want to drink this one.
Right, let's crack open Imposter Syndrome,
because I really want to talk about this one. I'm really excited about this one in particular.
One we're excited about, and I love my little tote bag.
Thank you.
I know.
I love it.
Can't wait.
Designer in Manchester called Emily, Lobster House Studios, and she's done some of that sort of branding. And she really got the hang, like, she understood what sort of the tone and vibe of the brewery was, like, immediately. So she's done a really good job with the tote bags and some other stuff that I've not quite got around to sort of splurging onto Instagram and whatnot, but I mean, it will be in the next few weeks, I'm sure.
Ooh, excited about that. Oh, that's hoppy. I love it. It's a hoppy one. Yeah, I mean, it says right on it, hazy, hoppy, tropical. So I'm like, I feel like that's exactly what I'm getting. It's hazy, it's hoppy, and it's tropical. Matches up pretty well.
It's it's sort of big on pineapple and tropical fruit without having any fruit in, obviously.
It's funny the amount of people like I've had the conversation with them. They're like, oh, you've seen it places. People are like, oh yeah, it's the fruit, and then like they're like, oh, it's not like, I've not tasted the hops. I'm not tasting. I'm like, but you are tasting the hops. The hops that were used were very deliberately picked, so you'd get those fruits. And it's just it's insane what like effectively a plant can do, isn't it? Like, you're like, cool, you've taken this green plant basically, and then you taste that pineapple, that is this, and it's just a bit like mind-blowing in some ways when you really stop and think about how bold some of the flavors are as well.
I mean, the hops are my favorite bit about brewing and writing recipes and stuff, so I'm pleased that they come across.
It's really fresh. I love it.
It's So where did this idea to make Imposter Syndrome come from?
The beer or
the beer?
Okay. So the beer came from, it was the type of beer that I like to drink. And then basically over lockdown, I got sort of deep into some homebrew forums about brewing these sorts of beers, and started reading quite heavily into a brewer in America called Scott Janisch, who sort of he knows his stuff with this sort of stuff, and he sort of comes at it from a sort of I suppose a more scientific perspective than purely sort of here's what I found when I brewed sort of thing. And so over lockdown, it was the beer that I brewed most often and sort of tried to refine, I suppose. And so that's sort of where the name came from as well, in the sort of the not quite ever thinking it's quite good enough sort of new iterations of working it out, rebrewing it, double brewing it and splitting it and trying different things and stuff like that. And so that was and then sort of the name sort of came from that, I suppose, and from the rest of the process of setting up.
It's got to be like taking that leap to sort of found a brewery that you probably has to have like a lot of, like, there's probably a lot of imposter syndrome that like really does come into play, that whether like, you know, rightly or wrongly you should feel a particular way. I mean, all feelings are valid, but it's got to be that thing of you're like, you sit and you panic and you just go, or do you ever stop and go, oh, am I doing the right thing? Like in that process, did you ever stop and go, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right thing? Like, yeah. I imagine there's gonna be so much of that.
Yes, obviously, multiple times a day. I think I've sort of always, suffered from is sort of probably a bit over the top, but I think I've always experienced imposter syndrome, and I think that I've always found it quite stunting, I suppose, and eventually getting to this point of going, okay, well, we are actually going to do this, and the reason that this beer is called that is because I sort of wanted to sort of point it out, is like, this is actually, it's quite hard for me, and I'm glad that other people are liking it. And it definitely, like, when you sort of write down and do the numbers and go, okay, we'll brew 3 beers and there'll be these recipes and it'll go mad and everyone will love them and all that sort of stuff, and you go through that 1 minute and then the other minute you go, but what happens if they don't, and what happens if you're an idiot, sort of thing. And so I experienced that quite a lot when sort of deciding to set up. And so, as I say, this beer was the one that went through the most iterations, and sort of the one that, the idea of brewing a beer at home and then thinking that you're going to try and get other people to pay money for it, strangers to pay money for it, I find a very uncomfortable thought. And so I'm glad that people are drinking it. I'm glad that people are enjoying it. I'm glad that it sort of stands up to some of the other beers out there. And yeah, I'll always feel a bit sort of DIY independent with me, I think. And this is just it's just an addition of that, I suppose. But yeah, and I think the very cruel thing, I was thinking about this when you were sort of going, we really want to talk about this. The very cruel thing about imposter syndrome is that you're sort of blind to it in other people, I think. And I think that's like when someone else comes to me and goes, like, they're an amazing singer, and they're sort of telling me, oh, I'm not confident enough to do that open mic night. And I'm always like, you idiot, obviously you're good enough, go and do it. And you can communicate that to them very easily, but it's very difficult to sort of say to yourself similarly sort of positive things. And so, yeah, I sort of just wanted to sort of put it out there, and ask me about my imposter syndrome sort of became a bit of a sort of a funny little tagline. And
I think it's absolutely brilliant. I just want to use it now because, like, honestly, when I say like we wanted to talk about it, it's because like I said, the amount of times that anyone that's listening to this, like, they've probably heard us talk about it so many times, but also just like, not on the podcast. Like, there were so many times that we were like, we'll just record this, and then if no one listens to us, like, that's also fine. We'll still do it because we just enjoy it. And we're like, who would want to listen to us? And then, Joe shared a story with me from this past weekend, I think it was, and she was saying that basically she had a conversation with someone who said, oh, I listened to your podcast and it like inspired me to want to, you know, pursue a career that they were pursuing and stuff like that. And I was just like, and even then, even after she told me that, I was like, oh, but it's mainly like you anyways, isn't it? Because you're like, you followed your, and then she was like,
no,
girl, no.
It was the podcast, right? It was the podcast. That means that's me and you, and you're the one that actually came up with the idea for the podcast. So yes, it includes you. And
but
she was like, no.
It's those kind of things where it's like, you know, getting it, like you could have, this is the thing, you're right, like the horrible thing about imposter syndrome as well is like you can get invited to do all the things in the world because of, you know, something you're doing. Like, you know, we could get opportunities to I don't know, be invited to attend a festival, or I don't know, just like there's these things that, you know, we've been asked to do something in particular, or we've managed to get someone to agree to do an interview with us or something like that, and you can go, I can't believe that, like, you know, I got invited to speak at this event that I was like, I don't think that I should be doing that. Like I was like, I'm not sure I
nearly had to twist her arms to make her do it. But that's that exact conversation that you're having about. Like she's like, I can't do it. Oh no, I'm not confident enough. And I was like, you have the experience. Go out and do it. 100%. And then in the reverse, this job comes up, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. And she's like, what are you talking about? Go and apply for that job. Like we do it.
Yeah, it was that moving into the beer industry that she was dealing with from this homelessness charity. And she was like, well, I don't know if I would really be qualified. I have not done this and this before. And I was like, so you apply and they say no, and then what? Like, you just carry on doing what you're doing. But it is very much the thing of like, you don't see it in yourself, like, not that you need our validation, but this beer is very good. So it's that thing of like, I
don't think you need any imposter syndrome, because this beer is delicious.
But the thing is, imposter syndrome doesn't work in a logical way. It doesn't just go like, well, other people are telling me it's good, so it must be great, or other people telling me I'm qualified to do this. I mean, I even noticed at the beginning when you were saying we do this and we do that, and you're like, I don't know why I'm saying we, because it's me. Jo does the exact same thing. Like her beer school, she was like, we do this and we do that, and then I'm like, don't say that, because then people are going to think it's us, and it's not. Like, I've done none of that. It's all your hard work to do it, and it's like, own your hard work.
100%. And I think I think the only way to combat it is to have like a social or work circle around you who sort of remind you that, no, actually you do kick ass, sort of thing. You can go for that job, or you can do that speech and sort of add to people's lives, sort of thing. And I think that if you don't have that sort of, I don't know, safety net underneath, support, it can be very easy to sort of assume that you actually can't. And I think, I mean, like, it's a sort of it's a really tough one for people who don't have that safety net. And so I'm glad that you both did, and I'm glad that, well, I'm very glad that I did and managed to get to this point. And when you sort of say, well, you don't need our validation, it's like, well, actually, yeah, I do. And it's basically like oxygen at the moment. It's like hearing someone say this is actually quite nice is a big deal. And I think I definitely, when I was setting up the brewery, I definitely realized how much of an impact, like, a few of my friends were sort of putting creative stuff on Facebook, and one of them was like, oh, I'm taking photos of me swimming, sort of thing, in open water swimming. And I just started commenting on his stuff and sort of saying, this is really cool. And I was like, I don't think I would have done that before, but I hope it would make as much of a difference to him that him saying my beer was good would be to me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I definitely sort of started going out of my way to sort of start telling people that, to try and be that safety net for other people. Safety net's the wrong word, but try and sort of be that impetus for the creativity of other people.
I think you could even do that with like strangers, because I know this is a slight stretch, but there's been like numerous times where I've gone out someplace, and like one example is I was working at a beer festival and someone had this they came up to the bar and they had this really cool shirt on. I love like Japanese stuff and all that, and they had a shirt that was like a bowl of ramen, but it had like a little ramen monster in it and everything. And it was just like really cool. And he came up to the bar with his partner and I went, I really like your shirt. Your shirt's really cool. And he went, thank you. You've literally just made my entire night. And I always just think like, if you see someone's wearing shoes you like, or you see someone wearing a shirt you like, something like, obviously there's a difference between being creepy, like it's how you say it, it's the tone in which you say it. Like you can say it in a non-creepy way to be like, I really like that shirt, I really like those shoes, like they're really cool. And that might have taken someone a lot to go, they might have put that shirt on and changed it 3 times going, I don't know if this feels right, like, oh, I don't know, is it going to look stupid? And then if you go out, if they go out and you say your shirt's really cool, they'll be like, okay, and that might have just built their confidence up a little. Obviously that's a little bit different than imposter syndrome, but like you never know who you're complimenting and how you're complimenting them. That might just help boost their confidence, just 100%. That little bit to go, yes, I made the right choice today.
100%.
I think we just like need to be nice to one another, like be kind and nice to one another right now. That's what everybody needs. And one of the things that I've seen, like doing my little online business and seeing things, is like not everyone can pay for things, and especially right now with the way things are, but there are little things you can do to support businesses and you know, breweries online. You can like their things, you can share their things, you can write comments and you know, share it with your friends and things. That's just 100%. Getting that word out for them, like putting those little things in that don't actually cost you anything because you're scrolling through Instagram anyway. Like put a little comment on about how you love that label or that beer looks tasty, and that's just gonna help those breweries out and those businesses out.
And following, I mean, like, I know we said it, I don't know if we said it before you were recording, but like people make a decision on whether, like shops make a decision on whether a brewery's got lots of followers or not. And I'm not begging for followers. I'm terrible at that at the best of times, but like that sort of thing makes a difference and doesn't cost anything, and it's really supportive. And I sort of said, like in the last couple of weeks, I sort of said, oh, our beers are at this indie shop and this other indie shop and this other indie shop, and if you go and buy our beer from there, you're supporting two businesses. And it's like, and like that makes such a big difference to the community, I think. And and that doesn't stop at beer, that's everywhere else as well. Like buy from the brewery if you want and all that, but if you buy it from your local place as well, then you're supporting 2 places, which twice as nice, I suppose. I don't know. I've got a ramen top on at the moment.
Do you have a ramen top on?
You see that?
Oh my god, I love that. It was a really oh my god, I love that so much. It was a similar design sort of.
What are the odds of that?
I know. That's really this was not planned. Anyway, this is not planned. I like your top. It was a similar design to that, but it had like a monster kind of like in the bowl, sort of like lounging in the bowl, and I was just like, that's amazing. That's super cool as well.
Love it.
There's more ramen monsters in fashion than anyone everyone expected.
It's more than I ever thought existed.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's cool. Didn't expect to see it again. Then you're like, oh, hang on a minute.
Well, there we are.
Amazing.
I mean, I did email you beforehand.
Oh, yeah. I was like, please make sure you wear your ramen top because I am going to talk about this story.
On it, don't worry. Yeah.
Teamwork, synergy.
Amazing.
But it is that thing of, I almost think that when it comes to imposter syndrome, it'd be interesting to hear like kind of what your take on it is. From the people I've spoken to, it's almost that thing, and I want to like talk about it because I feel like that it might normalize it a little bit more, is it almost feels like it's something that may not ever go away, and it's something that I almost think you kind of have to befriend. Like you almost kind of have to befriend your imposter syndrome and then know when to put it in check. And it would just be interesting to think like, you know, to understand what your thoughts on it are, because I have spoken to people and they're like, oh yeah, I've been doing this job for 20 years and I still have it's not there all the time, but it's that like I still have days when I'm like, what am I doing? And so the approach that I tend to take with it is, okay, well, I just befriend it, and when I know that I'm thinking like, oh, I'm not qualified to do this, I will, you know, go to my support system and be like, I'm being stupid right now because I'm feeling this way, put me in check, sort of thing. Or I just tell myself like, you know, fake it till you make it, you've got this, you can do it. And then eventually I start going, yeah, I can do this and I'm going to rock this and it's going to be great. What are thoughts kind of around that? Do you think it's something that you can just overcome? Is it something that you kind of befriend along the way? Or
I think some people will never and have never experienced it, and I think that's kind of weird. And I think that's a bit not not upsetting, but it's sort of like I think I've felt it in everything I've done to some degree, and I think that you have to, you sort of have to, I don't know, invent a different persona, I suppose. I mean, maybe that's why I say things like, as you said earlier, like, we've done this, we've done that, when actually it's not really a we, it's mainly a me and a couple of other helpers every now and again.
But it feels like you can celebrate your successes more if you go, oh yeah, we all did it as a collective. It's almost like that acceptance to be like, look, we did a good job, everyone.
Yeah, and you can also blame the other person if they don't like it. With the other person doesn't exist. But I think what you sort of said about fake it till you make it, I think that's sort of the answer, really. And I think it's not. I think it gets easier with practice, and I've never been quite successful enough to never have to sort of to finally believe that, if you know what I mean. Like, I've never quite made it, and so it's never quite sort of gone away. But I think you sort of have to fake it till you make it. And I think the other thing that I've found beneficial with it is that it's actually quite, or if you sort of use it correctly, it can be quite a good sort of thing for the checks and balances thing, to sort of go like, am I right? Do I need to ask another couple of people for some advice? And definitely I ended up doing that with sort of how to position like, I spoke to a couple of friends that work in charities, and I spoke to a guy who used to be a brewer, and I spoke to a couple more people that know a little bit more about marketing, and got some advice. And I think that's that sort of niggling thought of imposter syndrome. If that encourages you to sort of, as you say, sort of get a little bit more input or advice, then I think that's probably a good thing. It doesn't always feel great when they say, I agree with your imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
But that happens less than people think.
That's when you could go. That's when you could go. Oh, it wasn't me that did that. It was
the
we.
It was the we
did that.
Yeah, it was my employee.
Yeah, you go. Oh, my employee really messed that one up. So sorry.
Yeah, you start emailing.
I'm gonna try that now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try that with me. I'm gonna be like, yes, we have done this, and then when I do something that I'm like, oh, whoops, that wasn't me, that was the employee.
Yeah, I'm not sure how healthy that is, but yeah. I suppose I don't really feel qualified enough to answer that question sort of fully, in that it's sort of a brain thing, it's sort of a mental thing. All I can sort of say is, from my experience, is like, faking it till I make it has helped, as has getting another couple of pieces of advice, I suppose. Easy to say that, though.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think for everyone, I think the key thing is that it's like, it is different for everyone, and that's why, not sort of asking you to get a definitive answer from you on how people should handle it. It's just kind of widening that normalization of the topic to be like, yeah, okay, well, this is how, like, three of us feel about it, and it's maybe something that if someone's going, because I know for the longest time I kind of just thought, okay, well, maybe like it will eventually, this imposter syndrome I feel will eventually go away, and it doesn't matter if I've done something one time or 5 times. I was still on the 5th time going, yeah, I don't know if I'm the most qualified person to do this, even though I'd done it 4 times before. So I just kind of thought it was important to put that out there to like normalize, like, for me, and I can only speak for myself, I kind of felt like I had to use the fake it till you make it approach, because, and I completely agree with what you said, like, it gets easier the more you kind of do particular things that maybe gave you trouble before. Like, the more you do it, the easier everything becomes. But I just thought it'd be interesting to get like another viewpoint on it, because somebody might hear this and go, I just thought that there was something wrong with me, that I could do something 5 times and after the first 4 I still felt nervous, or I still felt this way. And it might bring someone comfort to be like, okay, so I'm not the only person that's done that then, and I'm not the only person that sort of questioned themselves knowing that I had done it 3 times before. So
100%, that'd be really nice. As I say, that would be great. And it happens it comes up a lot for me in doing this at the moment, because I mean, I keep sort of saying to myself, I think you'd feel a little bit more, you'd feel imposter syndrome less if you had that tap room and that kettle and you had that premises sort of thing. But the amount of money that we had to sort of start this up was just wasn't feasible. And so it feels a bit harsh to say it, but it's like, well, if we did have that, I think we'd probably, me and my wife, I suppose, would feel a lot more confident about it. But she's 100% confident in it anyway. It's just mainly convincing myself. But as I say, I think that's, if we weren't Cuckoo or contract brewing, then I think we'd feel like we sort of belonged a little more, I suppose.
It'd be interesting to know, like, you know, further down the line. So obviously Joe and I are going to help, we're going to put our positivity hats on further down the line. So, you know, you're going to get that, all of our positivity hats on. We talk about like what's going to happen, not what might happen. It's going to happen at some point.
When?
Yeah, when, it's when, not if. And it kind of feels like the people that we've spoken to before, though, it's always kind of like, cool, you've accomplished that, but then you're going to think to the next thing. So just remember back when that happens, remember back to this conversation where you go, when I get that tap room,
exactly,
I'll feel more confident. And then when it becomes when I get that next level up brew kit, I'll feel more like I belong. And you just like remember back to that moment where you're just like, cool. Because I think that's the thing, is if you're not taking, I almost kind of feel like if you're not taking risks on some, like, you're always going to probably feel some level of imposter syndrome if you're taking risks, and you know, no risk, no reward. But yeah, when that happens. But it would be interesting to know as well, where do you like your ideal setup for a tap room? If you could have like any setup you'd want and you could have it tomorrow, what would your ideal tap room look like? We're gonna like will it into
oh yeah, no, this is we're inventing a dream brewery. Okay,
yeah, we're gonna Sim City it.
like Spookton's tap room, you know, in a year's time you're like, this is exactly how I'd set it up. Like, what do you envision as like what you would want? What would be the ideal for you?
I think I would like, personally, I'd quite like a small-ish brew kit that leaves a lot of space for people to sit around and look at it. And one that would allow you to sort of take a few risks with what you're brewing and be a little bit more adventurous. I think part of me would like part of me cares more what the tap room looks like, really, and what that feels like. And I think I would, that sort of brew tap feeling of going in and sort of actually feeling comfortable and relaxed, rather than on a big sesh or on uncomfortable benches.
I was gonna say, are we having orange benches or no?
It's gonna be. Are you gonna be part of big bench? I just want you to know, Joe. Oktoberfest.
They are efficient.
The benches were at Oktoberfest as well. I took a photo of them. So you've now got this thing of every time we go anywhere, it's literally
always orange benches.
Bench watch.
Yeah. We just call it big bench. They're taking
We're
over.
not necessarily advocates for the big benches.
We don't. We don't. Yeah, no.
We don't advocate the benches.
We don't advocate, but we also don't talk bad about them. No. We just think, big bench has taken over.
Just pointing out the benches.
I think I think a few tap rooms are a little too uncomfortable, and I think it makes it feel like you're sort of enduring your time there rather than enjoying it, I suppose. I think Amity in up towards Leeds Way have got a really nice relaxed feel, comfortable, without you sort of feeling like you're sat on an industrial estate and they've got a load of benches in because they're so efficient. I think that makes a difference. And I think people should head, or I think breweries should head that way a little bit more. Because again, it's that whole thing about sort of competing for people. You're competing for people's bums, really, aren't you? Really, you're competing for the person who could either go up to the local pub and could sit about in comfort by a roaring fire and drink Guinness and know exactly what they're getting, or drink Peroni and know exactly what they're getting. And I think we should be competing as an industry, we should be competing to try and get those people into our places. And I think having more comfort in tap rooms and making them accessible and sort of making them in sort of nicer spaces to sort of spend time in, rather than, as I say, sort of endure whilst you sort of try the 3 new IPAs on tap sort of thing, which I'm happy to do, but I think that's probably a fault in me. I think that's so. I think it would be a small brew kit. Going back to what you said, that people want to spend time in, really, and that I think it would be really nice. I mean, particularly from the sort of the social aspect of the charitable aspect, it would be really nice to sort of think that sort of organizations could either meet up or find themselves using that space as hubs. That would be really cool. But I mean, this is a fake tap room in my mind. So, not yet. They can't. They can't make a booking yet.
Yeah, like, sorry, you cannot book. Not just yet.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet. Yeah, you'd be competing for some space, I think. But I think that would be my ideal. Whether we got as far as looking at a couple of spaces in Liverpool. I live on the Wirral in Merseyside, and we looked at a couple of spaces in Chester, really. And we're sort of still got our eye on a space in Chester, sort of thing. So I think the other thing is that you've got to have 70 grand sort of thing, and I think either
not cheap.
yeah, and either that comes from selling a lot of beer very quickly, or it'll come from a bank or some sugar daddy or mummy who's happy to look at the books and go, well, at least you're selling what you're making, and you're making a bit of money, so we'll take a punt on you, sort of thing. And I think the sort of the days of, I don't know, the days of people setting up brew taps and for sort of 15 grand in an IKEA chair is long gone, it feels, at the moment, especially with all that's the cost of living stuff at the moment is also making it very
challenging, I would guess, to say the least.
Yeah, I don't really like the idea of taking on a 5-year lease at the moment. And the other thing that I quite like the idea about is paying another brewery that I like to brew some of my beer, so that they're making a bit of money on their downtime, sort of thing. That seems like a sensible way to go, rather than sort of getting a bunch of new shiny vessels in that might be on sale again in 2 years if things go south, sort of thing. And so I think certainly in the short term, in the next 6 months, probably up to a year, will still be cuckoo and contract brewing. You haven't asked where I brewed them.
I was going to say, I thought about asking that, and then I was like, I don't know, is that like a rude thing to ask though? To be like, so where do you brew them? And then I was thinking, like, that might be rude. You might be like, I don't want to talk about that.
Well, I'll ignore the rude question, but no, I think there is a slight sort of stigma to it, because it sort of feels, it's not from your tap room, or it's not from your brewery, sort of thing. Like,
it's your recipe. And I think,
yes, it's your recipe, and I imagine you oversee it. Like, you've gone in. I'm guessing if you're cookie brewing, you've gone in and you've overseen it.
Yeah, we were there. So we in the first 3 beers were brewed at Allendale in Northumbria, way up north, and we chose them. Because they've got a 5-barrel kit and a 20-barrel kit, and they've got a canning machine that's big enough for the 20-barrel kit, and so you can brew on the 5-barrel kit with this awesome canning machine.
Nice.
And so decided to go with them and use their 5-barrel kit the 3 beers, so that you could sort of launch with a range without tying up too much cash in stock, I suppose, because I think most of the other places that have a canning machine on site will be sort of 10 barrel. And so do you really want to get 30 barrels of beer for a sort of a 3 can range? That sounded like scary business. So we did it on their 5 barrel kit, and they've just rebrewed Giggles and Imposter Syndrome for Key Keg, and that's going to be delivered hopefully at the end of this week. And then we might choose somewhere else nearby, or slightly closer to home in future. But yeah, we're really pleased with how they turned out.
Are all the kegs accounted for already, or if somebody is running a business, like if they were like, I want to buy it for the tap room, like,
yes,
can they buy it direct from you?
Obviously, if anyone wants to get in touch, there's some beer available, sort of thing. So we've got some cans, and we've got some of these key kegs that are coming in. I think there's not a lot of each one, sort of thing, because it's only the 5 barrel kit. And the first brews that we did, I got the mix wrong, so I put too much in can and not enough in keg. And so we're basically just sort of trying to rectify that with getting more keg this time round. Learning moment. But yeah, so that we've got some kegs coming in, and yeah, they're available. They'll go on eBrewer, but you can come get them direct, and if you're nearby, we'll deliver them.
Well, seize this opportunity now to say, if you want to see it at a bottle shop, an independent bottle shop near you, go in. Like, I always think, like, go in and request it, like with the shop. Like, if you've got a local shop that you go to all the time, especially if you've got a really good relationship with whoever runs it, like, go in and be like, this is a beer I want to see here. Go in and just request it, because
me.
Not you.
Oh, right.
anybody that wants to see it at their local business, go in and ask them. Just go like, check out this. I want
Spookton.
I want to buy it here, and then they can get in touch with you. Yeah. I expect you to go to every single independent.
I was going to say that's an incredible sales technique. Sort of.
Here you go.
I would like to see it in your shop, sir or madam.
Yeah. You sort of glasses with a big nose, and you sort of in the corner. Oh, there's no Spookton in here yet. Oh, you've got to spot that up.
You should go in undercover and go, oh, have you heard about this amazing
You can go in as your employee. Like, don't go in as you. Go in as your employee.
I've got a big wig. Yeah.
We have a really great beer for you.
I hear. Yeah. No, I mean, I've got a local bottle shop who every now and again I sort of say, oh, have you heard of so and so? And they say, yeah, and it's nice to just have a bit of a chat about it. And sometimes he sort of takes a punt on them, and that's great. But yeah, no. So we are selling to, I suppose, to answer the question, we are selling to trade. We are selling to the public online. We'll be doing markets and stuff like that in the run up to Christmas, and just sort of, I suppose, just hustling a bit really, and just sort of putting a bit of effort into selling the beer that we're quite proud of, I think. And that will be there'll be like me and a couple of people will be going to markets, and generally for moral support.
So you're going to turn up places to people, you're going to go, we're all here. They're going to be like, there actually is multiple. Like, what is happening?
There'll be some cardboard cutouts, I think. Yeah.
Oh my god, it would be amazing if it was just you in cardboard cutouts. But you have to be wearing the same exact outfit as well. It would just be like you wearing the same shirt in every cardboard cutout.
Amazing.
Oh, the ramen shirt, that's what's got to be.
Yeah, sure.
While we're on the topic of you hustling, is there anything you want to plug, any markets that you know are coming up? Because now's your opportunity to say it.
So we're going to be
yourself.
Back yourself. We'll be at, there's one. So I live near a place called New Brighton, which is where I used to live, and that's actually where the pub that hosted our launch beers, the Bow-Legged Beagle. That's where that's based, and there's a market there in a couple of weeks, and then we'll be in Leventhal in October and December the 10th. I know it's December the 10th. think it's October the 29th, maybe. I don't have my calendar in front of me. And then, I mean, if I'm going to plug stuff, then you can buy cans and from our site. It's free shipping at the moment. And if you want to buy for trade, then just drop us a line. There's plenty of ways to get in touch with us, and we'll sort you out, basically.
We'll put your links in the show notes so they can find you and follow you. Great. Beer.
That'd be super. Thank you very much, and thanks very much for reaching out, because it's nice to be seen. I suppose it's nice to be involved.
It was genuinely, I was really pleased that you agreed to come chat to us, and that like we connected in the first place, because like I said, I remember when we were looking through all the charity beers episode, and then I found the brew. I was like, this is really interesting and I want to know more, but like I found it right before we recorded and I was like, I don't have time to try to get this information now. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna follow them. It was really good. Yeah. And then it popped back up again and I was like, I remember this brewery. So yeah, it's really, really cool that we got a chance to actually speak to you.
Super.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So we stopped recording and then we started having a really good conversation, and so we started recording again. Sorry, Joe, I fucked up your editing. My bad.
And now she's sworn as well.
And I sworn, so that's two strikes now.
So I asked you. Do you want me to ask you again?
Yeah. Ask again.
Tori, do you think that imposter syndrome is felt more by women than men?
And my response to that was, I think it really, I can't say like hard and fast across everything. I can't speak for everybody, but from what I found from the conversations I've had and what I've observed within the beer community, when it comes to things that are historically male dominated, now whether that has shifted in recent years and there are more women involved, but anything that has those like historic connotations, like Joe and I having worked in IT before she moved to beer, or us having a podcast about beer where the main people that host podcasts about beer are men, or in the communities where the majority of people posting and talking about beer are men, especially craft beer, I find that we tend to have the imposter syndrome. For the people I've spoken to, we're the more vocal about having the imposter syndrome. And I think that's just because the experiences, and again, I can't speak for everyone, I want to be very clear, I can only speak for myself and the conversations I've had. We'll say something and it almost feels like we have to justify why we've said what we've said, or we feel we have to clarify what we said, or but we look at our male counterparts and a lot of them just go like, this is what something tastes like, and this is, I'm saying it with confidence, whether that's fake it till you make it confidence or whatever else. They just go, I've said something, and whether that's right or wrong, I've said it, and if it's wrong, then like, yeah, sorry. But what I've observed is a lot of times is like a woman will say something and then there will be a lot of questions off the back end of that. And so I think when you see that happening to other people and it happens to you, you tend to build up this bit of imposter syndrome where you're like, oh, okay, well, going forward, I don't know if I am qualified to talk about this. And I don't know if and all those little things add up. And we start going, oh, maybe I shouldn't have this. And then I guess that's where we get the initiatives like, Brave Noise, where we're like, everyone should be equal to have kind of, equal space in the community and all that. And that's really great. But that's my diatribe on the imposter syndrome when it comes to women versus men. Like I said, it's not a hard and fast rule. I'm not suggesting that, men don't feel obviously that's not true. Like we've been having this conversation with you. Like it's not it's just strictly from what I've observed and the conversations I've had, it does feel like at least the female side of it is a little bit more vocal about having these quite frank conversations about feeling that way. I don't know, Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
I think it's that because maybe it's also a little bit of learned behavior, because it's that, I really like this band, and then someone goes, okay, well, what's your favorite track off of this really obscure album of theirs? Like, we get the same thing in beer. Oh, you say you like IPA, so what's your favorite? Oh, you like European beer, then you must like blah 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 blah. And you're like, well, why must I?
Yeah, fuck off. Yeah,
I can like whatever I want. That's the whole point of beer, that there's so many different things that you can like. And
then you see another person that posts the set like a very similar thing, and everyone goes like, yeah,
well done, and you're like,
oh, okay.
Yeah, it's difficult.
I can believe it. Yeah. I sort of assume that, particularly in beer, I mean, just speaking about beer now, I sort of assume that women working in beer will feel it more than men, just from the sort of the pervading sort of beerness of it, sort of thing.
The representation as well. Like you don't see a lot of breweries, you know, when you see a brewery that has like a female brewer or has someone that's in like that position, like
the fact that we have to clarify that it's a female brewer. Oh, they've got oh, I didn't realize this beer was made by a female brewer
or non-binary or something like that. It's like
someone non-binary, someone one of our queer folk, like people of color, like all of that.
I think it was like we spoke to like Vendi at Vault City, and we talked to them about talked to Vendi about the Brave Noise beer that they did, and she was saying about how like actually the diversity that they have there is quite good. They have a lot of like female staff, and then she said it is something that like somebody comes into the business and is like, oh, it's quite diverse, and everyone really likes that. And it's when you can see it, it's that whole thing of, you can see it, you can be it. And I think in a lot of these situations, because it's becoming better. Like, I don't want to suggest that it's not becoming better, but because, it's still not to that wider scale that you see it, can sometimes, like Joe said, like you can kind of go, oh, maybe I'm not, I don't see it. Maybe I don't. Maybe that's not for me to do, or maybe I don't know if any of that just made sense.
No, I think it all made sense. Everyone. Yeah, I think it all made sense, and I think you're probably right. It's probably getting a bit better, but it's pretty slow, or it feels like it's slow from where I'm looking. Like with all the sort of things that came out in the last sort of 12 months about people's workplaces, it just feels like everyone's just gone a bit slow on it again. And I think
it's incredibly frustrating when you see that and you're like, why are we not more angry about this as a community?
Well, I think one thing that I sort of struggled with is sort of hearing all those stories and then sort of everyone going back to normal. And I found that really upsetting, actually, because I think there were some stories about some companies and people, and it was like, well, okay, I was like, well, I'm not buying from this company again, sort of thing. And I assumed that a lot of other people agreed with that sort of thought. Like, I assumed that there were people like me that went, well, I'm not buying from so-and-so anymore. But it feels like I'm seeing a lot of people going back to those places. And it's very, as someone who's outside of those inner circles, which I am, it feels, I haven't got any evidence that there's been any improvement on any of these things. And so therefore I'm sitting here going, well, okay, why is everyone else going back to them? Why is everyone else happy with this? I've not seen any evidence of it.
I think we've had pretty much identical conversations. But it's that thing of, you start speaking up about it, and especially when it's to somebody that it doesn't impact them, and or this spot gets good beer in, or there's this or that. There's always kind of some type of justification why, or actually,
it was that guy.
It feels okay, and
and it's that guy that left,
and if you say it,
and I'm supporting these ones.
And it feels like when you raise it, people just go, well, let's leave politics out of craft beer. And you kind of go like, but you can't, like, that's not.
No.
That is craft beer.
Right. That's the whole point of craft beer.
These people who say, oh, leave politics out of craft beer. What, the thing that, like, an enormous part of money, I get taxed an enormous amount, and it goes to politics. It goes to the government. You can't tell me it's highly regulated by the government. You can't tell me that it's not political. You can't tell me that this should be something that we enjoy without politics. that is complete rubbish, and it infuriates me so much. Like, it's the same with the people who say keep politics out of sport. It's almost completely politics.
Yeah. What really gets me is like I'd see like, you know, similar people saying keep politics out of beer when it was something that it was a story about something that was like aggression towards women or people of color or something like that. And then like, and this is no slight, I'm not suggesting this is not a charity support by any means, but then they go like, okay, like drinkers from Ukraine, like support that. And then you go, it's a fantastic thing to support. It's a fantastic thing to support.
Yeah, do support it.
Now I'm like, on one hand, you were saying keep beer out of politics. That's, you know, now you're saying put beer in politics, and you're like, you know, both are very, you know, it's important topics. You know, you shouldn't just keep beer out of politics. Like beer is all, I mean, really, craft beer is all about politics. So 100%. That's what I would find the most frustrating, is I'd be like, the only thing that I can see here is that this was a keep beer out of politics because it didn't impact you, or you couldn't identify with that, which is fine, because like maybe you're not as passionate about that topic as you are about another topic, and like that's totally fine. But to use the keep beer out of politics argument was just like so frustrating.
100%.
It was. We've had this conversation a lot.
Sorry, yeah.
No, it's fine. And it's,
no.
We're gonna keep having it, because if we don't keep talking about it, like you said, these things are going to peter off, and then people are like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy that beer again.
It's nice and it's refreshing to have the conversation, because this is where it links back into imposter syndrome, is because then sometimes it can feel like, is it us?
Yeah.
Are we wildly wrong? Like, have we completely, you know,
am I being a hysterical woman?
Yeah, like, you know, is this frustration in our heads? Is this something that, you know, we're overreacting to, or, you know, it's really nice to have a conversation with an outside person who, like, full honesty, like, you know, we didn't have this conversation before, you know, we've not spoken all that much. It's nice to know that there's someone else that's coming in and is like, no, I've shared that frustration, because that can almost be validating in a way that you're like, okay, cool, so I'm not being crazy about feeling that particular way.
I mean, speaking of you being frustrated, I was expecting you to ask me about sort of Brave Noise as well, and sort of like, it feels like I really liked your, I think it was an Instagram post where you like listed out, it
probably was, I did. Well, the common reasons that people give, the common reasons that people gave, which I very much understood those reasons behind it. I very much did. But I thought, you know, these are all the reasons that we have been given in the past. And I think there was a lack of information around why, you know, some people felt they didn't have all the information for whatever reason. And so I was like, well, guess what? We've had the conversation now, so I'll answer all these questions to the best of my ability. From my viewpoint, I can't speak for Brave Noise. I'm not, you know, one of the Brave Noise team by any means. I just try to preach it everywhere I go. Even when it doesn't fit in, I'm like, hey, so about Brave Noise. Like, I've gone into like coffee shops, and I'm like, oh, Girls That Grind Coffee, they've put that in an international women's collaboration brew day beer. Oh, so that brewery did something for Brave Noise. Let's talk about it. Like, I will find any way to talk about it. But I think the thing is, it's the reason, at least I can't speak for Joe, but the reason why I didn't sort of ask about it, and it's actually interesting that you've mentioned it. The reason I didn't ask about it was because, very similar to how you felt about mentioning charities, I have no issue asking difficult questions. I've no, you know, that's not a problem, as you I asked loads of questions. It was very much that I didn't, you know, where I wanted to focus on your brewery, and I didn't, you know, we didn't have a pre-chat about Brave Noise. I didn't want to blindside you and then make you feel like you were forced into saying something or taking a stance on something that you maybe hadn't thought about before. And I know I didn't want to put you on the spot and make anything uncomfortable for you that we hadn't discussed about in advance, because it's one of those things that I don't want anyone to feel bullied into doing something. I know some people are like, well, if they're bullied into it, that's fine. But we had just spoken about charities, and you going, I don't want people to, you know, think I'm doing it for the wrong reason. And I wouldn't want to make you feel like you were talking about Brave Noise for the wrong reason, if that makes sense in any kind of
no, it does.
way.
It does make sense. I think like today I was thinking, oh, what might they ask me about? Let's do some revision. And I think I expected you to ask me about it due to like it being sort of like in the same world, I suppose. I'm fine that you didn't, but I suppose what I was sort of expecting to say is like I really appreciated the post, because it was like, here are all the reasons why you can't say no, sort of thing. And I like that sort of that way to look at it. And I ended up sort of thinking about why I have said no so far, I suppose. And I think that helps you then go, okay, but then this is the threshold for me then saying yes. And I think that what I like about Brave Noise is that it's so organized and sort of, I don't know if the word is right, but it's so sort of defined, if you know what I mean. Like it's very, very well defined. And I think that sort of that moment that craft beer in the UK had, like whatever it was a year ago, 9 months ago, is that it was all a little bit like asking Siobhan to do a lot of emotional work that she really shouldn't have had to do on her own, or
publicly
had to do it all. Like should have had to do it all. And so I think eventually we will do a Brave Noise one. I learned a load from your post. I didn't know that you could slightly tweak the recipe.
That's the thing, is a lot of people didn't know those things, and I seized that opportunity when we got to speak to Ash and Ren to be like, I'm thinking in my brain from the start, like the interview we did with them, and this is where I won't let Imposter Syndrome take over. I'm going to pat myself on the back for the interview that we did with them, because I think, and Joe as well, pat us on the back, because I think I went in with the mind. Thank you. We went in with the mindset of, okay, well, I'm going to ask questions that I think somebody that's in the industry, if they happen to be listening to this, or someone that wants to challenge their favorite brewery, to ask them why they don't do it, so that they're armed with the information they need to say, yeah, but the Brave Noise team have said you don't need X, you don't need Y. So it was stuff like, we were told, don't have, I understand your situation, like when you're cookie brewing, you don't always have like the most open schedule to be able to kind of brew whatever you want whenever you want to a degree. Like it is more limited. So I was kind of like, okay. So I went in and I asked the question of, if somebody has something in tank already, can they just use that? Can they just reskin something they have? And they were like, well, if they follow all the other rules, like for them, not to put words in their mouth, but quite literally what they said to us was, for them, it was way more important that you follow the rules of having the code of conduct and that you were doing the right things. The recipe was, to them, like secondary. They were like, if you want to do that, fine. If you want to use the design we've given you, fine. If you want to tweak the recipe, fine. Like, it's more important that we know that you're listening and that you're dedicated to the cause. And they kind of went through the stats of like, when everyone did the All Together beer because of lockdown, that had so many breweries sign up. And when they had the Black is Beautiful, that had so many breweries sign up. So what is it about Brave Noise that is not getting more people to participate? So that's why I tried to make sure I asked those questions, because I wanted to be able to go back and say, well, to answer your question, you're telling me you don't have enough room in your brew schedule, just as an example. Well, that doesn't matter. Do you have something in tank that you'd be willing to reskin and work with a charity for? Like, it's quite simply, it was that basic. And it's very I don't handle compliments very well. I'm very self-deprecating. So the fact that you were like, I learned a lot from your post, I was like,
that was good.
I just want to melt from that. But
no, it was good. I felt, I sort of was looking at it today and sort of thinking, well, I should have done that. And then I was trying to sort of, I think the reasons I didn't was that I didn't really want to sort of release one of the 3 first beers. I didn't want it to be on the back of Brave Noise and get sales off that sort of thing, because I think there's an element of, you have to be big enough to contribute to the cause rather than from it, sort of thing. And I think Cuckoo Brewers could do it, definitely. I don't see why not. And I think I didn't really realize that you could amend the recipe quite so much as you can. And I think that would be interesting to me, and I didn't really realize. But then I think the other thing is like the code of conduct is just me, and it's like, well, I'd love to write a code of conduct, and I know I would stick to it, but it's also a bit like, it feels a bit performative, I suppose, for my personal situation right now. But yeah, definitely I'd be hoping to do that in the next sort of 3 to 6 months if everything else goes well. And so, as I say, I was expecting it to come up just because it's sort of another charitable sort of angle to, or even more than charitable, it's sort of making change, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of breweries that are doing the right thing, and I've said it before, like there's so many breweries that are doing the right thing, and I'm like, all you got to do is, like, I know I say all you got to do as if it's not, there isn't steps to do. I mean, there is steps to do, but I personally don't think that, we ran through it like lightning speed, and it's literally like they will help you along the way. They are responsive, they are flexible, they are willing to work with you. If you're already doing the right things, like, okay, for you at the moment, it's just you, but you can write a code of conduct that is going to be scalable as you scale your brewery out.
Yep.
That kind of stuff. So Joe,
it puts your values out there.
Yeah.
Even if you're just like, this is the code of conduct that I go by. So here are my values, and here are Spookton's values.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I don't think that's performative. I think that's brave. That's making a brave noise.
We somehow managed to take an interview, bring it back around to brave noise. I do appreciate that though, because like I said, I mean, there was also, like I said, it's just, when I say like we, have the conversation beforehand, like for anyone listening, we don't really have a conversation beforehand of here's everything I'm going to ask you by any means. It's more that like I would have the courtesy if I was going to ask someone something like that to be like, FYI, we're going to start recording. I'm going to ask you this. And I just kind of was like,
to drop the bombs on people.
As if all of a sudden I'm like going to ask you about you and about Brave Noise as someone that we have like no existing relationship, going to ask you that question. So I think that was actually really cool that you've actually just said you've thought about it. So.
But I don't, I think it shouldn't be so much of a bomb or viewed as so much a bomb. I think it should be just like, hey, why haven't you done that?
Yeah.
And then finding out why, sort of thing. And I think that's interesting, and I don't think that needs to be I wouldn't view it as aggressive. If you asked me that, I don't know if I would feel differently if I had a big flipping brewery. I don't know, but I think it's okay to have those sorts of conversations.
I completely agree. I think difficult conversations are important, and we've had that conversation before when we did when we spoke to the guys at Beer Fridge. We were like, there's going to be a difficult conversation. Both of us should be free and open to ask whatever it's coming from a place of genuine curiosity. No one's trying to be snarky, no one's trying to be rude, no one's trying to be aggressive, malicious, like any of that. So let's put those caveats to the side and ask ourselves the difficult conversations that we know other people will be thinking and want to ask, and let's just get all that out of the way. And it ended up like a really enlightening conversation. I think it's just like, for me, it's different when you're going into a conversation knowing that that's going to be the topic. No, I mean, like I think it's quite interesting. It's like, it is like in my mind it was like, oh, when you're going into that conversation, that's the topic, you almost kind of feel like, okay, I can ask those more difficult conversations. But in my brain, I think that then goes back to the imposter syndrome of like, oh well, because we hadn't met you before, if I start asking this, are you going to think that we're being like you kind of learn, it's back to that like, are you being aggressive when it's assertive, and it's all that kind of thing. So it's funny.
Imposter syndrome.
Full circle.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah.
Oh,
cool.
I'm glad we recorded again.
We started re-recording.
Good luck editing.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Thank you again. This is excellent.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Imposter syndrome. I love it.
Imposter syndrome.
That was such good chat.
I mean, 100%. Ask me about my imposter syndrome. I'm always honestly
just go back and listen to our long conversation we just had about it.
I genuinely mean it though. Like when I was asking the questions to John about, his thoughts on it and everything, because I really do feel like, for me anyways, I found it quite comforting to speak to other people who had said like, oh yeah, I've been doing this for 20 plus years and I still feel this way. It's just, it gets easier with time, but it doesn't 100% go away. And it like made me feel more comfortable in a weird way. Like, I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but I do feel like it really helps to have those conversations, and I'm hoping that by us sharing our feelings, other people, you know, it's opened up a wider conversation. Like, I'd be willing to have a whole podcast episode just sharing stories of imposter syndrome, because I feel like it is that important. But please do reach out. You know, people go, oh, my DMs genuinely are always open. Like, if you want to have a shared conversation about imposter syndrome, like, please feel free to share it. Ask whatever questions you want about it. Like, I'm pretty much an open book. I'm willing to have a conversation with anybody about it if it will make you feel better on the topic. And maybe you don't have that support system that we talked about, like I have with Joe and like the other wonderful people in our community. I'm happy to be that support system for you. And like, you'll message me and go, here's the thing, and I'll go, back yourself.
Yeah. So here's a tip that I should have said while we were recording, and I didn't. That I picked up from the online business world. Start yourself and like Evernote, some sort of note app, right? Get yourself a little note app on your phone. Start yourself a notebook, and you're going to add notes to it. And you're going to call that I Am a Badass. And in there, you're going to take like screenshots of things that make you feel like you are the boss. Like, I've got ones where like people have said that they had an amazing time in one of my lessons. I've got like where we've had reviews on the podcast where people have loved it. I've got little stories where people have said that our podcast has made them brave, and they've gone and followed their dreams. Like, put stuff like that. The thing I was thinking as well while we're talking about it, the one that I need to add in there that I haven't yet is my bio from the Women in Beer Festival when they were introducing that I was going to be on a panel, where, and like, I wrote it myself, but it was like, I was like, oh, what do I need to put in there? I'm a certified cicerone, I'm a podcast host, I'm a beer educator, and I'm an assistant events manager in beer. Oh, that's quite a lot of good things, and I've accomplished all of that by myself. Add that to the notebook that says I am a badass because I am a boss. Look at all the things I've done. And then when you're having a bad day, or your imposter syndrome is showing up, you go to that notebook and you read it and you remind yourself about why you are a boss. Go do it now.
Yeah, I remember when you first told me that tip, and then I started like saving little things, and like every so often I'm like, oh, that time that person said that one really nice thing, like,
put it in your notebook.
That's great. Like, yeah,
it doesn't even have to be on your phone. It could be an actual notebook. Write down nice things that people have said. It'll make you feel better.
Or a folder on your, if you've got a PC, a folder on your PC, and then you can snip it stuff and save it in the folder. And that is actually a really good idea, because the amount of times that like you want to look back and be like, what actually, I mean, I don't just do it for like when people say nice things. Like, I've done it where, you know, I'm like, cool, we got invited,
done an accomplishment, right?
We've been invited to a thing that I never thought would happen. Like, cool, boom, that goes in there. Or like, when we did the Brave Noise with Mirakai, and we had our bios of like our, you know, who we were and so on. I was like, I am gonna
put that in,
or like what Brave Noise meant to us. I was like, save that in there, because that was like a really cool thing that I got to do. And that's a really good tip, because it does make you feel like a total badass when you're like, what? I felt like such a boss bitch. I was like, yes, I did all those things. It makes you feel like the only way I can describe it is like Lizzo.
Yeah.
Like, so sometimes I think to myself, what would Lizzo do?
Your inner Lizzo, because she is a boss.
I just think like, how would Lizzo feel about this?
Right.
And then I'm like, feel that way. just feel that way. Because
get out of my way. I'm playing that crystal flute.
Don't care who's pissed off about it. It's happening.
Don't care.
Badass.
Don't care. You ain't never heard of that crystal flute until Lizzo played it. Be quiet.
100%. I fucking did not.
Nobody knows.
I absolutely didn't.
No one.
And then all of a sudden, can I be real with you? I forgot that James Madison was even a fucking president. That's how irrelevant that flute was.
Irrelevant.
Not
until Lizzo made it so.
I'm not saying presidency is I'm just, don't take this out of context by any means. But also, I was like, James Madison, who's that? Oh yeah, president. And then I was like, get it, girl. And then everyone got mad, and I was like, you're just jealous, you know how to play flute.
You didn't get to play the flute. You didn't get to play the crystal flute. You didn't think about doing it.
If I tried playing it would be just sad.
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
That is truly like what I also do when I'm feeling really shit is like I've got a playlist.
Oh yeah, you got a good playlist.
I have a playlist that I think is just called Bad Bitch or something like that. Yes. And that's where I put all my Bad Bitch anthems. And obviously Lizzo's on there as well. So like
obviously. Tori, if people want to ask you what's on your Bad Bitch playlist, where can they get hold of you?
If you want to find out my Bad Bitch playlist, or you want to ask me about my imposter syndrome and have a nice, meaningful conversation about that, you can find me on Instagram at adventures_in_optimism. You can, I don't know why you would, but you can email me at adventuresinoptimism@gmail.com. If you don't need to email for that, that's email's
you can send them the link to it.
Okay, well, yeah, I could actually Spotify lets you share. Oh god, that'd be embarrassing, but yeah, I could do that. Or I barely use the TikTok, but I'm on TikTok. But yes, Adventures in Optimism on there. And then if you email the podcast, you will probably get me as your first point of call if you email there. And that is a Women's Brew. Is it a Women's Brew podcast?
A Women's Brew podcast at gmail.com.
A Women's Brew podcast at gmail.com. So we are ill. We are, but if you couldn't tell, we sort of clarified at the beginning with John that we are both losing our voices for two different reasons. And so we are ready to have some tea and go to bed, pretty much. So yeah, a Women's Brew podcast at gmail.com. I definitely set it up and I definitely know the email address. And I would definitely probably be the first person that responds to it if you email there. You can also get us on Instagram, but I'll hand that over to Joanne. Jo, where can people talk to you about your imposter syndrome?
Don't talk to me about my imposter syndrome because imposter syndrome is real. We've established that in this podcast. You can find me at my beer school because I run a beer school. It is
you, not learning. We.
I run a beer school. It's called Love Beer Learning. It's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Pinterest. I have a website that I built myself, and it is called lovebeerlearning.co.uk. And there is an email address, lovebeerlearning@gmail.com, if you want to talk to me about all of the different things that I do, because I do a lot of stuff, because I am a boss. Imposter syndrome is out the door right now. And you can find the podcast on Instagram and on YouTube as A Woman's Brew. I think that's all of it.
So we're going to go kick the rest of this imposter syndrome.
Finish this imposter
syndrome off for tonight until tomorrow when I'm like, all right, on that note, Jo.
Cheers.